If a person is guilty or innocent of a serious crime, is the fact that they've done it before pertinent or prejudicial? Tonight on Jane Hawtin Live, should juries know about an accused's criminal past?
Stand by, Canada. Now you can talk to the newsmakers and have your say. This is Jane Hawtin Live.
Hello, I'm Jane Hawtin. Last week, a Toronto jury convicted John Kehoe and Edward Schwartz of aggravated assault, choking, robbery, and possession of a dangerous weapon. In addition, John Kehoe was also convicted of attempted murder. But what the jury didn't know was that both of the accused were already convicted double murderers. Wendy Carroll is the woman who was the target of their assault. She joins us now with her husband, Shore Tronson. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Well, you've been through a traumatic event, including the trial, which I guess, like many people, you feel that you were
as traumatic,
right, or re-victimized by.
Yeah.
But take us back so that people across the country can understand what happened to you back on July 2nd, 1996.
Okay, I'll take you back a little bit prior to that.
Okay.
About the end of May, I had a call from a woman who wanted to buy a house. Her and her husband did the normal kind of speaking with them, had them come into the office, do an interview, started showing them some properties. This went on for 4 or 5 weeks, I guess. And we had found a house that the woman really liked, and she wanted her husband to come through it one more time. So she had called me on the weekend of a long weekend just before July 2nd and asked if I could set up an appointment for her husband to go through the house one more time prior to them putting in an offer. And he also, about half an hour before the appointment, he called me to say, would it be okay if he brought in another friend of his who's a home inspector to check out the structure of the house. Again, it's very typical,
right,
kind of expected almost. So I said, sure, no problem, and they met me at my office, and I took them out to the house. And then, yeah, within minutes of being in the house, they both attacked me completely simultaneously. They both had weapons. One had a huge hunting knife, and the other rope to tie my arms. And it was, there was very few words said. Not that you really need a whole lot said when someone's tying up your arms and the other one's choking you. Mm-hmm. So it was quite terrifying. It was actually quite terrifying because they weren't asking me for anything. They weren't, they weren't trying to take my purse. They weren't, so it was very confusing because you really didn't know what was going on. It was just complete terror.
So they weren't saying anything. They weren't saying, we want your credit cards, we want your wallet.
No, at one point, as I was being strangled, one of them looked in my face with a bit of a smirk and said, we're not going to hurt you. We just want your money. But at the time, he was not allowing me to breathe. So it was a very scary thing because you looked at these people and you knew these were not normal people. Something was definitely wrong.
Right. Now, they claimed during the trial, because you were stabbed in the neck, that you fell on the knife in the struggle while they were trying to just rob you. Was the argument that was made that they were trying to rob you.
And I cut my own throat.
That you cut your own throat, that they wanted, in fact, to keep you alive because they wanted to get your PIN number so they could go and get the money out of your account.
Yeah, you can't really follow any of their stories through, or they don't make sense, of course. But yeah, that was basically what we had to sit through. A couple of weeks of trial.
The entire process, it would be, they were very contradictory in testimony, and the defense's entire position, in fact, was kept changing stories to sort of suggest that there might be some sort of accidental scenario that happened. And this was infuriating in the trial process because we kept hearing new stories, and we wanted to get more of the truth out, which is this exact issue of their criminal records and their past.
So it's very hard and very frustrating to be sitting in court looking at the jury, knowing what you think they should know, and not being able to say a word.
Story.
Exactly.
Now, do you remember the actual stabbing?
No, I don't remember the knife going into my throat, but again, what comes out in the testimony of the actual accused is that I was probably unconscious when they stabbed my throat. Because
they had been choking you?
Yes.
Yeah, 3 or 4 times they choked me unconscious, and I kept coming conscious. I kept reviving, and then, it's hard to say again because we have so many versions of his story, but in one of them he says, how could she possibly know she was unconscious? So it leads you to believe that, I either angered them or something.
But you were able to crawl be out of the house? I
remember, I guess, regaining consciousness. You don't really consider it that at the time, but I remember not being able to see because, I guess because they'd strangled me so many times, all the blood vessels in your eyes burst, so your eyes are in fact full of blood, so it impairs your vision quite a bit. And I remember having to feel to try to find a door, because I realized I didn't have a whole lot of time to get out.
When she was at the hospital, the police, in fact, had said that they weren't really sure of the scenario of what had happened, but they had found her blood all over the house. So she had actually traced the entire perimeter inside the house
Trying to find the door.
Find the doorway.
But think of yourself. If you were in a situation like that, you're not in your own home, and all of a sudden you're half blinded and in a panic. I mean, you're just trying to get out. So, and luckily I found a little boy, who's not a little boy anymore, but Mark, and just basically said, please call 911, and terrified his entire life. But
you lost 40.
Very appreciative there.
You lost 40% of the blood in your body.
Yeah.
I guess you're told afterwards. So
Yeah.
you're very lucky.
I am
that
very
you survived
lucky indeed.
this.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that we've kind of taken on the challenge that we have.
Right. So let's move forward to the trial, because I guess what must have happened for you through this process was finding more and more about these accused, and first of all, finding out that they were out on parole.
In fact,
how did you find that out?
Finding out about our entire legal system as well, because neither Shore or I have ever been through the criminal justice system for any reason. So we found out all their history, we found out how the system works, kind of all in one.
There was a really strange graduated set of events, though. When Wendy was hospitalized, she, of course, didn't know why she was attacked at this point at all, for any reason whatsoever.
That makes sense.
And they were still out on the lam. They hadn't been apprehended yet, and the sort of information was leaking out to us about who these people were. And we were sort of, I believe, alluded to at that time that they were, in fact, parolee violators. And we were terrified at that situation because we had no idea of the motivations to this situation. Of course, Wendy was incapacitated completely. So that's when it first began, and then it's like we wanted to know more and more about this situation.
And so tell us what you found out about these two.
At first, I think we just found out that they were convicted criminals. We didn't really know what they'd done or anything like that. Then we found out, paroled criminals. Then we found out that, in fact, they were in breach of their parole at the time. And that's when we started getting angry, started saying, well, wait a minute. Okay, we put them out on parole. When did they breach their parole? Yesterday?
Right.
No, months before that.
Right.
But there's no mandate.
They were supposed to be reporting to their parole officer.
Exactly.
Once a year, which seems surprising.
Again, it's kind of a comedy of errors. It seems like the information slips through the cracks at any given time. Whenever a file is supposed to reach a parole hearing, it doesn't get there, or the relevant information is gone. I mean, I don't really know where to put blame for those kind of issues, but definitely the system needs to be changed. I mean, we've spoken to some police officers that, not in this case at all, but in other cases, have asked to be present at parole hearings in order to give information. Maybe they've followed some person for 10 years and really feel like they know the history, and they're declined.
So you find out these guys are on parole. You know that they've been convicted of some kind of a crime. When did you find out what the crime was that they had?
When they picked them up, was it?
Yeah, when it was just shortly after they were picked up, we found out the crime, and this made us completely incensed because of the fact that they were left alone or left to their own avail after being in violation of parole, and they were in fact both double murderers. It was an absolutely shocking situation.
Yeah, like the fact that it was both of them and they were double murderers. And then I thought to myself, well, how on earth could they already be on parole? And we come back to our consecutive sentencing issue. Even though John Kehoe murdered his two little girls, he only served, you know, two-thirds of one sentence. So, boom, he's back out on the street.
What, he served 15 years, and then he was out on parole. And he killed his daughters, who were, what, 18 months and 9 months?
And 9 months, two little girls, yeah.
And he killed them because he was angry. His wife said she was going to leave him.
Yeah, and turns out the more we find out, too, it seems like he strangled his first wife as well. You know, I mean, it's just, the further you look, the worse it gets. And that's kind of very disheartening, but at the same time, you feel like even more incensed to do something about it.
And the other accused had killed his ex-girlfriend and her boyfriend. So both of them had killed two people before.
Yeah.
But
no
when you
victims left living.
No, you're the one who survived it.
Yeah.
And then you go to trial and find out the jury doesn't get to know this information.
I was very, very angry at that. I mean, I knew they had the right to bring that motion before the judge, and we kind of, I guess, expected it to a certain degree, but there was some parameters set by the judge that weren't adhered to by the defense, and that made it very, very hard to deal with. So again, we were sitting in court listening to these people make character references that the Crown could not.
So they couldn't bring forward the fact.
Whatsoever.
They couldn't bring forward the fact that these were double murderers.
Exactly.
But they were allowed to say things like what?
Like they'd never done anything like this before.
They'd be foolish to kill and
spend the rest of their lives
in prison. that they'd be stupid to want to murder somebody for a robbery, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he tended to rehabilitate
you're not able
his
to
whole
jump in and say,
character.
you did it before.
I mean, we're not able to. I was ready to go from the third row, but I mean, the Crown isn't even allowed to bring up anything against that. So the jury's just kind of sitting there and thinking, okay, they're making all these statements. Nobody's arguing with anything. Nobody's cross-examining, but they don't realize they're not allowed to.
Right.
So he's going on about what a family man he is and how his son is so important to him. He's killed his other 2 children. So...
And so the jury would have to accept this because no one else is jumping in because they wouldn't know.
And every time anyone argues any of these legal proceedings, the jury is all filtered out. So they have no clue that this arguing is even going on. They just see it at face value and off they go.
Now, what was scary for you was that this jury deliberated for a long time and came back several times to the judge saying that they couldn't reach unanimity.
And then a lot of legal questions, like, you know, if this happened, then is this what this means? And it's very disheartening because, I mean, at least myself, I was questioning, I guess I didn't explain what happened very well.
Right.
I guess I didn't get my point across. Somehow these people aren't understanding what happened to me. So you kind of self-doubt when really, I mean, I couldn't have changed that situation at all. But
now, ultimately, John Kehoe was found guilty of attempted murder, but Schwartz was not.
Right.
He was found not guilty of that particular charge. And the judge allowed the jury to come back in after they had delivered their sentence. So tell us what you observed when you saw that.
Well, my neck was wrenched all the way around because I was really, really curious how they were going to react. A lot of friends and colleagues, of course, you speak to everyone about something like this, said, well, you know, people are going to remember that. At least one of them would remember that, wait, these guys are double murderers. I don't think any of them did. I mean, when they read out their criminal records, they were, you know, a little bit lengthy.
So they read out the priors when they were doing that with the jury.
I turned around to watch them, and everyone I looked at, mouth dropped, eyes bugged. They were just like, what? So I was really surprised none of them came forward, actually.
I think it was a real key issue for them. The question was planted early on and never explained. And so there was huge gaps in timelines. And I'm sure these people thought, hey, we're intelligent enough. Give us the accurate information and we'll decide if it's relevant. I don't think that any one of those 12 people was there to do a bad job. They were absolutely diligent. They never took their eyes off the judge or off a witness or off of the Crown.
They were very attentive.
And they could have handled it. I believe that, absolutely.
What about the issue, though, that maybe they wouldn't have gotten a fair trial, that this would have prejudiced the jury if they'd had this information?
Well, I think we have to there decipher between violent and nonviolent crime, and also crimes that are similar in nature. I mean, if someone evaded taxes or did something like that, and then, you know, we were just speaking about this before, got charged on something like a robbery or something, okay, they're not at all the same, but a violent crime where even, I mean, the same means of murder are used, I think that's very relevant information on that person's character. And I think the other thing that's wrong with our justice system is when someone does commit a crime like that, none of their rights are removed from them. They've pretty much violated every right I have, yet not a single right is removed from that criminal. I think that's where we're erring. I think that's where the problem is. I mean, something has to be taken from that person, and if you do something like that again, could your trial be prejudiced? Well, yes, it could. And I think it very well should. That is what we've created society for.
We know there's a stigma attached to crime. In fact, when you go for a job interview, they ask you questions like, have you had a previous criminal record?
Right.
What is that previous criminal record? And you tell them or you don't. I don't know if that's particularly legal on the employer's part, but it's accepted by you and I in our society as not being prejudicial, but being realistic. So why wouldn't we apply that same sort of realism to our court
When it's
system?
the most important, then we hide everything.
Human life.
Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll meet Wendy's lawyer, Tim Danson, and we want to hear from you as well. Should juries be told about past convictions?